attorney. The jury is not present. They've been excused for the afternoon. As I indicated earlier, the first thing I want to deal with is the situation with Mr. Santos. I've received communication from Ms. Diaz's office that he intends to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights. Ms. Diaz, can you come up to the podium with your client, please? Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Annabelle Diaz on behalf of Mr. James Santos.
All right. Does Mr. Santos wish to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights as to providing testimony in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is that correct, Mr. Santos?
Yes, sir.
Either side desire any further inquiry of that?
No, Mr. Pugh, be back down in a second. No, no.
Say what?
Mr. Pugh, be back down in a second. No, we would not require any further inquiry.
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Santos can be returned to whatever authority he's supposed to be returned to. Thank you for being here, Ms. Diaz.
Thank you.
Y'all are excused.
Thank you.
All right. What is the defense contention at this point, Mr. Prince?
Defense contention, Your Honor, pursuant to case law provided, is that if there is any evidence corroborating an out-of-court confession, even one which doesn't meet hearsay requirements or hearsay exception requirements, which I would submit this one does, under both the former testimony and statement against interest exception, given his unavailability, then the statement has to be admitted pursuant to United States v. Chambers and the defendant's Sixth Amendment right to present a defense. The critical question under the case law provided to the court is whether, like I said, there is any corroborative evidence for the confession, and I would suggest as well that there is evidence of that sort here. One of the pieces of corroborative evidence is the DNA. The court's already...
We don't need to get into argument.
Yes, sir.
At this point in time, but what I want to clarify, exactly what is it that you think should be admitted?
I would submit that the appropriate way to handle it would be to have a witness read from the transcript of the motion in limine hearing where Mr. Santos testified.
What was the date of that hearing?
The 27th.
What's that?
The 27th, sir.
July 27th?
Yes, sir.
So that's what it is you propose the court accept?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is the state in agreement?
No, Your Honor, the state is not in agreement as to that, especially in its entirety. If the court does so rule that some of it is admissible, there's certainly a vast majority of that is inadmissible hearsay, attack on character of the victim, and things of that nature.
I wasn't asking for argument, Mr. Fuchs. Just confirming you object.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. Mr. Prince, you can present whatever evidence you think would assist the court in making this determination. But let me say one thing. You've mixed three legal theories together. They are separate and have separate criteria. Just mixing them all together is not very helpful. We have a due process argument under Chambers. I've obviously given this some thought. It would seem to me that your fourth criteria is going to be very difficult for you to overcome because the statement is not admissible if the witness is not available for cross-examination, as Mr. Santos is not, and there certainly is some question as to the credibility of that statement, but I think that's the major issue you're going to have to resolve. Admission against interest is a different, admission against penal interest is a different theory. It would appear to me that you're unable to meet that burden because that requires that the declarant be available for cross-examination, which Mr. Santos is not available for cross-examination, so I don't see any legal basis where that can apply. Former testimony requires that the other side have had the same motive for cross-examination. And I've raised these issues to say these are things you're going to have to deal with. Frankly, the court didn't give any thought to Mr. Santos not testifying during the course of that hearing, but the court specifically cut off the state's cross-examination in that case. Maybe in retrospect I should not have, but I did. Because it indicated the only issue before the court is the admissibility of the statement, and credibility was not something for the court's consideration at that point in time. So it seems to me it's going to be very difficult to establish that the state had full and fair cross-examination of that statement, which is what is required for the theory of former testimony. But, I agree that there are a series of options of how this could be admitted. I just wanted to make sure let's not get sloppy and blurring the edges on those theories. So you wish to present testimony, Mr. Prince?
I do, Your Honor, and I'd ask for some direction as to how far afield the court wants me or prefers me to go in corroborating Santos' testimony. For example, I have witnesses available that help establish time of death. Of course, if the time of death is later at night when Mr. Segura is shown to be home, that would be corroborative of Santos' statement, but I know it doesn't bear directly on Mr. Santos exactly what he's saying. So I can present those witnesses if the court wants, if not.
I'll rely upon, and you can argue anything that's been presented during the trial so far. Seems that those type of things can be argued largely from the evidence that has been presented. But I think we need to focus on direct corroboration of Mr. Santos, and I assume the state will be focusing on basis to impeach that statement. So I don't think we need to get way far afield, but what testimony do you wish to present?
I would present the testimony of Dr. Jesus de la Cruz, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. You'd face the clerk and be sworn, please, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your Honor, at this stage, I want to raise the issue that we did file a motion limited regarding his testimony.
Well, I'm going to have to hear the rule on it, so proceed, Mr. Prince.
Dr. de la Cruz, can you please state your name and spell both your first and last name for the court reporter?
Ciesly de la Cruz, Jesse, and capital DE, space, capital LA, space, capital CRUZ.
What do you do for a living?
What I do for a living?
Yes.
I'm a gang consultant.
What does that mean exactly?
That means that I travel throughout the United States to testify on gang cases where the individual has been charged or there's an allegation concerning gangs.
Okay, so in criminal cases, you look at various aspects of the evidence in order to make a determination about whether there are indicia of gang relatedness, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell the court first about some of your real world or life experience that has qualified you to speak on those matters?
Well, to start, I was a gang member from a very young age. I got in a street gang at the age of 13 in Northern California. A few years later, when I moved to Los Angeles, I got in a street gang in Los Angeles. At the age of 21, I was sent to the penitentiary in California, and I joined a criminal organization, the Nuestra Familia, in 1973.
Did you have, during the part of your life when you were involved in organized crime, did the gangs or criminal organizations that you were involved in have interaction with Mexican cartels?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when guys were getting out of prison, from Nuestra Familia, they would go to Tijuana. At that time, the really only cartel at that time was the Felix brothers in Tijuana. Also a little guy named Toñito and Roberto, because the cartels were just evolving at that time. And we made the connection with them to sell drugs, to get drugs from them and sell them on the streets in Northern California.
Okay. What about criminal associates, friends, and family members with whom you had direct interaction? Were any of those people directly involved with or members of Mexican cartels?
Correct. Yes, I had a cousin, and I say had because he got shot by the military in February, I believe it was, in Reynosa, Tamaulipas. He was a member of the Zetas. He had just gotten out of the federal penitentiary, and I called him specifically about this case. And prior to his, having the shootout with the military police in Reynosa, Tamaulipas, where he was killed. In addition to that, I have two nephews that are currently connected with cartels, but they're connected with the Familia Michoacana cartels. One of them was kidnapped by the cartels, and we had to pay a $60,000 ransom because he owed them money, and they were going to kill him, but they liked him, so they just beat him up real bad and allowed us to pay the money so that they would release him, and which they did. We paid the money.
How was that ransom negotiated? Did you have any personal role in that?
No, I didn't have personal role in that particular transaction, but I did educate my sister on how to go about it, right? So my sister would call me and I would tell her what, tell him this, ask him this, make sure you do this and do that. And I also told her that she should prepare to move out of where she lived, because if they ended up killing him, they would probably end up killing them too.
The folks that you've told us about and the specific life experiences you've described, have you had opportunities over the course of your academic career to, I don't know, I would say it's formal as an interview, but question, discuss with these individuals their real life experience within and dealing with cartels?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now tell me a little bit about your academic background.
Well, in 1997, I enrolled in community college. I did the 2 years and transferred to Stanislaus State University in Turlock, California. I obtained a bachelor's in sociology. I went on at the same university and obtained a master's in social work with a specialty in deviance, which was, gangs and so forth and so on, and crime. And then I went to work, and I went back to school in 2010, and I obtained my doctorate in education in 2014.
Okay. And during the course of your doctoral studies, did you focus in part or in total on the interaction between cartels and American criminal street gangs?
Well, I studied gangs in general. My dissertation is on gangs, but initially, my dissertation is on gangs in Northern California. But initially, I was going to look at the differences and similarities between the Maras Salvatruchas and the cartels, the Nuestra Familia and the Mexican Mafia, the Aryan Brotherhood and the Black Guerrilla family, the Cambodians and the Vietnamese gangs, and the Norteños and Sureños. But when I spoke to my about a year later, when I told my committee chairperson that what I was wanting to do, she said, "That's too big of a task. You got to narrow it down." So I focused on Norteño street gangs.
Notwithstanding the specific focus of your dissertation, did you have opportunity over the course of your doctoral studies to look at all of the types of topics you just described in the context of organized crime as a whole?
You know, I reviewed and read. I can't put a number on it. In my dissertation, I have like 15 pages of references that I reviewed, and books that I reviewed, and journals that I reviewed, and many different gangs and many different topics that relate to gangs.
Now, have you ever been qualified as an expert in court, either state or federal, to give opinions about whether particular facts or pieces of evidence are indicative of gang activity?
Yes, I have. I did a federal case, RICO case in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I did a Mara Salvatrucha case in Newark, New Jersey. I'm doing two cases. One's a death penalty case right now in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm doing a case right now in New Mexico, the Mexican, the Nuevo Mexico Sindicato, which is a prison gang. I have been qualified in probably 15, 20 counties in the state of California, relating to many different types of gang, African Americans, Asians. I did one cartel case in Modesto, just many different cases, Sureños, Norteños, Asians, all of them.
How many cases have you testified in court for?
I've done approximately 33 to 35 jury trials where I've testified in front of a jury, and I've done probably 5 preliminary hearings where I testified in front of the judge. I've testified in probably 7 or 8 evidentiary hearings, 402 hearings, as they call them in California. I don't know. I think they call them Dauber motions in the federal court. But I've testified probably 50 times overall.
Yes, sir. At this time, Your Honor, I would tender the witness as an expert.
Well, I'll let them argue that as part of their motion to exclude.
Yes, sir. Dr. Dela Cruz, did you have a chance in this case to review evidence and talk with other defense experts, including DNA experts, forensics experts?
In this case?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And before we get into the specifics of this case, I'd like to ask you some general questions about cartel tactics and
I think you need
interaction.
to come up to the podium, Mr. Prince. I'm afraid the court reporter is struggling with this a little bit. I'm sorry. I should have started with that.
Tell me about the interaction between South American supply cartels and some of the Mexican distribution cartels like the Los Zetas cartel.
Well, the connection between them started when Chapo Guzman was the main guy that started it all off, as far as the connection between the Colombians and the Mexican cartels, the Sinaloa cartel. And so they made a pact, I guess you would say, a business transaction, that they would buy so much at so much of a price, and that happened probably in the 90s, maybe late 80s, and as a result, it has evolved into huge. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Let me turn this off. I'm sorry. I thought I had turned it off. Okay.
As a general matter, does that structure remain in place, that South American drug production groups or families or cartels still funnel drugs into the United States through Mexican cartels?
They do, but there's also, the Mexican cartels have evolved and they've done, a lot of them produce their own drugs themselves, right? But because cocaine, the coca leaves and so forth and so on, it's grown much better in Colombia, there's still that connection.
I see. And then if you could explain the other side of the equation, how the Mexican cartels will interact or deal with American criminal organizations to facilitate distribution of illegal narcotics throughout the United States.
Well, what they'll do is they'll typically go into a neighborhood or somewhere where they know somebody, and they will contact that individual, and they start dealing with that particular individual who may or may not be a member of a street gang. Now, the street gang itself, the whole street gang itself is not involved in the whole process. It's only this particular individual who then enlists the help of other individuals to distribute and sell the cocaine or whatever drug it could be, heroin, could be marijuana, depends.
In terms of the general rules, I suppose, of doing business with a cartel, if someone is found to have stolen from or lost drugs that belong to a cartel or affect cartel tactics, who all would be held responsible for that financial loss?
Well, this is the way it works. Let's say that I am a cartel guy and I enlist the help of a young lady or an individual to transport drugs from point A to point B. And she or he gets arrested somewhere in between point A and point B. So, generally speaking, the cartel will kill the whole family. Because they can't get to her, but they'll kill everybody else, and they let her or him know if something goes wrong, your family's going to pay. Generally speaking, that's what will happen. If you're found to be stealing from them, they're going to make an example of you and your family. Everybody's going to go.
When one person brings another person into the criminal organization, which deals with a Mexican cartel such as the Zetas, what culpability or responsibility does the individual who brings a person who's later discovered to have stolen merchandise or money from the cartel bear?
He's 100% culpable. The other person has really nothing to do with that individual, right? Because what happened was the deal was made. For example, let's say me, the guy makes a deal with me. I'm responsible, not the person, whoever got arrested, because I enlisted their help. I'm the one responsible.
Okay. In your experience, do Mexican cartels have the ability to carry out violence against individuals, even who may be incarcerated in state or federal prison?
They do.
Okay. Turning then to the specific facts of this case, you indicated you've had a chance to discuss forensic findings with defense expert Knox, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You've also had a chance to review the findings of defense DNA expert Kevin Knoppinger, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in the course of those conversations, were you able to identify particular facts or factors or pieces of evidence that were consistent with or indicative of potential cartel involvement in this offense?
Well, there was a number of factors that were brought to my attention, not only by the discovery itself concerning the crime scene, but by the two individuals that you mentioned, the two experts. One was that there was numerous footprints. The other one was that the victim had been beaten or killed or struck with an instrument that had three different types of surfaces, and the other was that there was a spade left against the wall, like brand new spade, like a shovel. And those, and then of course I reviewed the viciousness of the crime itself.
Okay, let's talk about the vicious nature of the offense first. What, if anything, does that indicate to you relative to potential cartel involvement?
Well, taking into account the things that I was told and that I reviewed as far as what the young lady, the victim, was allegedly doing, as far as drugs were concerned.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, the things that I reviewed and the things that I was told by different people involved in this particular case was that she was supposedly transporting drugs from Brownsville, Texas, into Atlanta, and that she had skimmed off the top.
You had a chance to review James Carlos Santos' sworn written affidavit?
Correct, I did.
Okay.
And so taking that into account and the fact that children were killed, right, and the viciousness of the act itself and the way they were killed, right, with the brutality, right, and of course, once again, the footprints that were indicating that there was more than one person, the surfaces of the weapons that was used that indicated to me that there was probably more than one person involved. All to indicated that this was probably a Zeta crime, cartel crime, and there's a reason that I say that, because if in fact she was bringing drugs from Brownsville, Texas, which if she skimmed $100,000, I'm just hypothetically saying if she did, that means that she would have had to have been bringing huge amounts of drugs. You cannot go into Brownsville, Texas and buy drugs unless you're dealing specifically with the Zetas, because they control that area.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to go there and buy drugs in that amount from anybody that's not connected with the Zetas. The second thing that I took into account was a spade. The Zetas initially were military people. Now in the military, the ace of spade is the death card. So when I called Miguel, who was my cousin, the one that got shot by the military police, I asked him about the spade, and he said that the spade was a calling card from the Zetas, not to let the law enforcement know that it was them, because they wouldn't know, but to let everybody in the underworld know that it was them, and that if they messed with the Zetas, this was going to happen to them or their family.
Did you discuss with forensic expert Knox that there was no blood spatter or blood or hairs of any kind found on the shovel in this case?
That's correct.
Despite the fact that it was in proximity to the victim's body that would have been covered in blood if it was either there or used?
Absolutely. That's why I made that conclusion that it was a calling card.
Okay. You mentioned the forensic expert's opinion that multiple assailants were involved. How does that play into your assessment that this may have been a cartel involved assassination or murder?
Well, in the time that I was involved in crime and prison and all that, I've witnessed 32 homicides, different homicides inside prison. And I found my brother's body stabbed 47 times. And every time these types of crimes, vicious crimes like this, they're always, most of the time, committed by more than one person. So the fact that the drugs, the fact that the spade, the fact that there was all these footprints, the fact of the viciousness, the fact that children were killed, all played into my conclusion that it was a cartel killing.
Were you also made aware of the fact by the defense forensic expert or in discussing the case with the defense DNA expert that foreign female DNA was found under the victim's fingernails in this
Yes.
case? What, if any, significance does a female's potential involvement, or would a female's potential involvement have in your analysis?
Well, oftentimes, like, for example, I'll use my brother, it was organized crime, but it wasn't a cartel killing, but it was organized crime. They sent a woman to knock on the door, right? And so he opened the door, and then they ran in. So to me, it would seem that she would be the one, and she was probably the one, and maybe this Miss Peters knew this particular female, and I'm not sure, I'm just saying, but if a female knocks on the door of a house, generally speaking, they're not going to be as afraid as if a man or a stranger would knock on the door. So usually what they do is they use a woman as the go-between to get in somewhere.
You indicated that was how the kidnapping was committed against your nephew?
No, that's the way they killed my brother.
Your brother, okay. Did you also have a chance to discuss the fact that witness Benjamin Whitfield, who had previously been incarcerated with witness Carlos Santos, said that Santos had admitted that one of the children was killed in front of the mother?
Yeah, I read that.
Okay. Did you also discuss with forensic expert Knox the physical evidence which supported that claim?
Correct.
How, if at all, would that play into your analysis?
Once again, the cartels are a type of, they're vicious people, they're sociopathic individuals that have no remorse. They're not typical individuals like a regular street gang. A regular street gang will not do this generally speaking, will not do this kind of crime without ramifications from the gang. But the cartel is a different animal. One of the things they want to do is they want to make sure that they instill fear in people. So what they do is they want to teach lessons, and they do it by killing your children in front of you, like they did here, or cutting your head off. They do different things.
What, if any, significance do you assign to the finding that this Angel Avila's person DNA was located at the scene?
Well, I know that he's a Colombian that used to work with the cartels, and that he got arrested. He lost a whole lot of money according to the documentation that I reviewed. And so oftentimes what will happen, this is an individual that's pretty knowledgeable, not only about what's going on in Colombia, but also in the United States. So he's a very important individual as far as to utilize him. So they could have, and I'm just speculating here, they could have used him, right, to do this in order to save grace for what he had done, lost the $1 million or whatever it was that he lost during the time that he got arrested.
Would a Colombian supply side member of a criminal drug trafficking organization indicate anything to you about the nature of the organization?
Ask me again.
Would a Colombian supply side member of a drug trafficking organization's involvement in an execution like this indicate anything to you about the nature of the organization?
Well, yeah, I already know they're violent, terrible. They're very violent individuals that will stop at nothing to send the message that you're not going to mess with them, that kind of stuff. That they are very that they'll get you or they'll kill anybody that gets in their way. That's who they are.
I have no further questions for the witness at this time.
Ross.
Dr. De La Cruz, let's go back and talk about what your dissertation was actually about.
Okay.
And could you explain to the court what your dissertation actually focused on and what it was limited to?
Well, it wasn't really limited to that. I did a little research on, but the dissertation itself was on on a street gang, Northern California street gang in the city of Stockton, California. So members from Northern California street gang. gangs, not just in the city of Stockton, California.
So it was limited to gang members, and in fact, it was Latino gang members, wasn't
Correct,
it?
correct.
In the city of Stockton, and why they were getting pushed into the gang by the school and by the treatment they were receiving at school, by the community and law enforcement. Is that right?
No, what I was looking at is I wanted to determine whether or not they had been motivated or pushed into the gang by the behavior or the treatment of police officers, the community, school, and so forth and so on. That's
So, what you were looking at, why young people were being pushed
Correct.
into the gang by the quote-unquote system.
correct.
Now, let's cover a couple issues, sort of get them out of the way. One is, are you being paid for your testimony here today?
Absolutely.
And how much you charge and how much have you billed so far?
I charge $200 an hour and 16,000 so far.
Okay. Now, you ever been convicted of a felony?
Absolutely.
How many felonies have you been convicted of?
I got, I can't be specific, but I got at least 5, maybe 6.
Okay. Now, you said you learned a lot. You said you started at a gang member at an early age, and that was in California. Is that correct?
Correct.
What part of California?
Northern California.
Okay. And went to prison at 21.
Correct.
And how long were you in prison?
I was in prison that time, I don't know, 5 years. I was in and out for the following from 1973 when I got to the first time. The last time I was in prison was 1996. So I was in and out.
Okay. And did you yourself, I'm not talking about anybody you may have been associated with, did you yourself ever have any direct contact with anybody in the Mexican cartel?
Yes.
Who?
One of the Felix brothers from Tijuana, and Toñito and Roberto. I used to go to Tijuana and La Nacha in Juarez, Mexico, and pick up heroin back then in pounds, 2 or 3 pounds at a time.
Okay, so that was in Tijuana.
Tijuana and Juarez, which is El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
I also went to Durango in 1977, 78 with my cousin, and picked up a substantial amount of heroin up in the mountains.
All right. And all this would have occurred prior to 1996?
Sure, yeah. 1978, around there.
Now, in doing your background research and to form an opinion in this case, it took you a little while to form an opinion in this case. Is that correct?
Yeah, it took me probably 2 or 3 months, probably, because I had to review everything. I had to talk to people. I had to call people, different people.
And who do you mean by people? You keep saying people, but you're not putting...
Members of cartels in Brownsville, Texas, and through my cousin who lives in Dallas, Texas, right? So he connected me with people in Brownsville, right? So I talked to 2 individuals in Brownsville, Texas, via the telephone concerning the Zetas and what was going on as far as drug distribution. And the reason they talked to me is because of my cousin.
So the research you did was calling people who you believed, you connected through your cousin, who you believed in fact were members of a gang to discuss facts of this case?
No, members of the cartel, sir.
Or members of the cartel?
Yeah, they're different. Gangs are different. But anyway, I didn't have no reason not to believe that they weren't. They were giving me information that was consistent with what I already had read and reviewed in books and the internet and different newspaper articles throughout the nation concerning the brutality and killing that cartels do.
All right, so you in fact did Google searches to read newspaper articles in order to try to form this opinion.
I did.
Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Now, can you identify any methodology that's generally accepted in the scientific community that would allow you to form an opinion based upon talking to people who claim to be something and doing Google searches on the internet?
Well, it's not scientific methodology, but I use the same approach that the police officers use when they're doing expert or investigations on specific gangs or whatever. You know, there is no, especially when it comes to the cartels, there is no scientific data right now that really explains who they are, what they are scientifically. And because it's dangerous for the researcher, especially the researcher that doesn't know what I know. It's dangerous for them. So there is not any scientific methodology per se that I could point to and say, okay, this is the way they do it, the scientific community. But me personally, as I stated, I do the same thing that police officers do. I contact people in the community or in communities that I believe are involved or could be involved or could connect me to people, right, that could give me the information needed.
You've talked a lot about California, especially California 20 or 30 years ago. You've also talked about contacting people, your cousin who was killed, to talk to him about it. Was there another cousin in Dallas or
There's two more nephews, not cousins.
okay,
they're nephews.
okay, that you contacted them?
Yeah.
And you said somebody connected you. I thought you said a cousin or somebody or brother had connected you to somebody in
Brownsville.
Brownsville?
They're nephews.
Their nephews had,
Yeah,
had
nephews
done
out of
something.
Dallas. I also have a nephew in Houston, Texas, but he's in the penitentiary now. That's involved with the cartels, but I didn't talk to him.
And did you talk to anybody in Tallahassee about gang membership here?
Well, I've done research as far as the crime situation in Tallahassee.
And how have you done that research?
Well, I looked. They got plenty of articles. I know they got 5 killings between June and now, 16 shootings, and what I found is that none of those shootings.
And when you say articles, do you mean you Googled it and read the newspapers?
Well, newspapers. I mean, you know, and I seen the news. Actually, I seen the news last night. Actually, when I got here, and they were talking about a community group getting together, talking about this violence that's been occurring in the city of Tallahassee.
So
And
that's the extent of your research as to the gang stuff in Tallahassee. You looked at the news last night?
well, I'm not concerned with gang stuff in Tallahassee. I'm concerned with the cartels and the part they played in this particular crime.
Well,
I don't have any.
how do you know the cartels are even associated with the city of Tallahassee?
I didn't say they were associated with the city of Tallahassee. I never said that.
Have you ever specifically being asked to do what you're doing, what you're being asked to do in this case, have you ever just done an evaluation by looking at a crime scene and saying this was a gang hit?
Have I ever looked at a crime scene and determined that it was a gang hit? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Yes, I've done that.
Have you done it? Have you done it for Mexican cartel?
No, this is the first time.
And the cases you did testify into that the looking at the crime scene saying it was a gang-related crime involved street gangs, didn't it?
No. One of them involved the Nuestra Familia. I'm currently doing a triple homicide in Modesto, Stanislaus County, which involves the Nuestra Familia. So it's organized crime as well. And the Blood Nation, which is organized crime in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, RICO case, and the Mara Salvatruchas, which is a criminal organization, not a street gang, in Newark, New Jersey. So I've done numerous gang cases where it's been organized crime.
Now, you're basing the fact that the spade is the death calling card based upon something your deceased cousin told you when you talked to him, is that right?
Well, he confirmed it. I had already heard about it.
How'd you
Right.
hear about it? You read it on the internet too?
No. I know a lot of people. I'm like, I can go into the community, just about any community, not in Tallahassee because I just got here last night, but I can go in just about any community and connect with individuals who are currently involved in criminal activity, gang activity, and they will talk to me, not about the crimes or gang, what they're committing at that particular moment, but they'll tell me about what's going on. So that's the way I learn and keep abreast of what's going on.
And you're basing your determination that Miss Peters, that's the victim in this case, if you did not know that, she and her family were killed because she allegedly was involving moving a large amount of drugs, and all this is based upon what Mr. Santos put in the letter?
No, it's based on the viciousness of the crime, the footprints in the crime, the different weapons that were used allegedly in the crime, the fact that she was transporting drugs, the fact that they killed kids. All these factors play into my opinion.
Do you know who went in and out of the crime scene?
No, I don't.
Do you know whether or not that people walked across the threshold where her body was laying through the blood and stuff? And
I don't. I'm going by what the forensics reconstructionist told me, that those footprints were there prior to you folks going into the crime scene. Not you, but the law enforcement.
right, so you're basing this upon something the forensics examiner told you what
No,
what
I'm
the
not.
crime scene looked like.
That's one of the elements. There's about 5 or 6 elements that I'm basing
Let's
it on.
just focus in on this one. So you have somebody who says that the footprints that came in were there before law enforcement entered.
Correct.
But you didn't make that determination, did you?
Well, of course not.
And when you were asked about, I think at the time I did the deposition of you back in January of this year, do you recall it?
Yes, I do.
You indicated you had testified something like 28 times, is that correct?
Probably yes, at that time. I've
And-
testified numerous times since then.
You always testify for the defense, is that correct?
Well, I'll testify for the district attorney if they ever call me. I
If
don't
they
have-
ever caught,
They
but
never
so
caught-
far you've only testified for the defense.
Well, I've offered my services to the district attorney, the elected district attorney in different counties, and I explained to them that I would be willing to train their assistant district attorneys to know what makes a gang crime and the elements of a gang crime, but they have never called me.
Yeah, nobody's taken you up on the offer, have
No,
they?
they haven't.
Now, one of the things you're also assuming is that there is DNA of Angel Avila at the scene, is that right?
No, I never said anything about any DNA of Angel. That gentleman that you just mentioned, I forgot his last name, but I never said anything about his DNA.
You were asked by Mr. Prince, is that something you?
Oh, yeah, okay, the report, that, you're talking about the Colombian guy?
Yeah,
Yeah, I did.
okay. And so you're taking that on faith as well, aren't you?
Well, yes, I didn't do the test myself.
And you're basing on the fact that there may be a woman's, an unidentified woman's DNA at the crime scene because, I think you said that because in your brother's case, but he was killed by organized crime, not the cartel, that a woman came up and knocked on the door.
I'm basing it on that, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
No, I'm basing the fact that that's the way they work usually, whether it be cartels, organized crime. Cartels are organized crime, by the way. So, that's the way they usually work as far as trying to get their victim to open the door.
Is woman one of the killers too, or did she just get you in the door?
Well, the woman that was involved in my brother's murder was not a part of the killing squad, because it was a squad.
Have a moment, Your Honor. Yeah, I thought I did. And have you ever reviewed a crime scene where you saw a spade or a shovel?
I have not.
And so this was the first time, and you based that upon some stuff you read plus what your cousin said.
Well, he was a Zeta, so I pretty much took him at face value, and the material that I read was credible.
How'd you determine it was credible?
Well, because it came from a journal, and it came from well, most of the time they're pretty credible.
Okay.
I just took it to believe. I believe that it was credible.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down.
It's not the defense, we call Benjamin Whitfield.
Yeah. Benjamin Whitfield,
Yes, sir.
is he in custody?
No, he's not.
Somebody will need to get him.
She's getting him, yes, sir.
Come on up here, please. Face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Have a seat. Slide at the microphone, please, sir.
Mr. Whitfield, can you please state and spell both your first and last name for the court reporter?
My name is Benjamin Franklin Whitfield, Jr.
Mr. Whitfield, were you incarcerated with a man named James Carlos Santos in Florida State Prison in 2011?
Yes, sir.
And how did you initially meet Mr. Santos?
I was put in K-Wayne, and he was next door to me. And I was in K1128. He was in K1129.
Okay, so you were in close physical proximity to each other within
And I
the
was
same.
just position next door, side by side.
At some point, did you establish an acquaintance type relationship with Mr. Santos?
Yeah, we started conversating after a while, maybe after 2 or 3 days or something like that.
Okay. Did Mr. Santos ever talk to you about his involvement in the 2010 murders of Brandy Peters and her children?
Yeah, when he first started talking to me, he just said he asked me did I know anything like surrounding like that case and stuff. And but he didn't. He tried to like to portray it like he didn't know anything about it. And then, but as time progressed, then he started telling me more and more stuff about it and about his involvement in it.
What did he tell you his involvement in the murders was?
That it was something about a drug debt, and he was in communication with her while he was at FCI over there off Capitol Circle, Federal Correctional Institution, and he was using, I guess, some type of email system or something they have set up for prisoners for federal prisoners over there at FCI.
Okay. Did he eventually admit to you that he ordered her and her children's murders?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did he tell you about any of the details of how the murder was carried out?
He told me that she had some dishes that supposed to been like I think these dishes was made by Tiffany or something like that. And he said that she had, it was like supposed to been 3 computers in the house. And he said that they had them when they came and committed the murders of them, Brandon and her 3 kids, that they took one of the computers. I think that might have been the computer. I don't know for sure that he was communicating with her on.
Did he say specifically who he ordered to carry out these murders?
No, he just
I
said.
lost. You said you started talking about something about dishes, and
Yes, sir.
you didn't follow that through. What were you saying about
You
dishes?
saying about some dishes that she had that was supposed to Tiffany dishes that supposed to been worth like $3,000 or something. It's him or somebody supposed to have purchased for.
You're saying the people that committed the murder took those?
No, he's saying that they supposed to took the laptop.
Took a laptop.
One of the computers that he was communicating with her. I guess it might have been one that he was emailing her with.
Okay. So he was just saying he had purchased them for her at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, purchased her like in I think like a vehicle, and supposed had got her like a passport to go to Colombia, stuff like that.
Did he say anything about one of the children being killed in front of Miss Peters?
Yes, I think he told me about I think the little boy was supposed to have been killed in front of Miss Peters first, and then the two little twin girls.
Okay. How long did you remain at the same correctional complex as Mr. Santos?
I think we was side by side maybe for maybe about 3 weeks, a month and a half.
Okay. And you came forward and shared this information with Florida Department of Law Enforcement agents in, is it late 2016 that took place?
Yes, sir.
When you were almost at the end of your sentence, correct?
I was about let me see this. Yeah, I think I had probably about 2 more years, a year and a half or something like that left for my sentence.
Without gain time, you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've since been released from state prison?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why was it that you decided to come forward with the information that Mr. Santos had shared?
Because this gentleman here, Mr. Henry Segura, they said that he wasn't the one that did it. And so he was trying to figure out a way to help him, but he didn't want to help him, and then implement himself. And so I just, and me being wrongly accused myself, and I didn't want to see him lose his life like that.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever been convicted of a felony or crime of dishonesty, Mr. Whitfield?
I've been convicted of a felony.
How many times?
Let me see. Like 2 times. Well, 2 different. I've been in prison incarcerated 2 different times.
Okay, incarcerated 2 different times?
Yes, ma'am.
And you met Mr. Santos in prison?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was in 2012?
Yes, ma'am. That would have been in 2012, like May. I think I met him, I know it was like around May, June, July 2012.
And it sounds like he told you about some pretty gruesome murders he said he committed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
A woman and her 3 young children
Yes, ma'am.
getting killed in front of her.
Yeah, he told me that the little boy was supposed to be killed in front of her. But he didn't say anything like more about the 2 girls, but he just said that it wasn't supposed to have been a lot of blood in the house, and that
There wasn't much blood in the house?
it's supposed to not been like a lot of blood or something like that. And, but I know it's supposed to they supposed to be mutilated or something like that. And he said that they had that TPD. They didn't know about how actually the murder had happened. So I think they took and reconstruct the house like in a warehouse or something like that. And they had took out pipes and different stuff, something like that. They had said, I don't know.
So he said that a little boy was mutilated?
No, he said that they was supposed to have been like mutilated or whatever.
I didn't quite understand. what
Yeah,
you
I
said.
didn't.
Would you
Like
say that
mutilated,
again?
decapitated, or something
Say
like
it to
that.
the microphone.
Like mutilated.
And you said decapitated?
Like I said, like mutilated. However they was killed, he said something like about there wasn't much blood. That's what he had said. And that the little boy was killed in front of his mother, and that when the body was found, I think the first one that was found, like the door was left open. Or something like the first one that was supposed to be found was the little boy. So when she opened up the door or whatever, he was supposed to be the first one they supposed to find.
Okay, so he said that, what do you mean when you open the door? When you open the front door of the
Yeah,
home?
the front door of the home.
So according to James Carlos Santos, the little boy was killed in front of his mother.
Yes, ma'am.
He was mutilated, and when you first opened the front door of the home, his body was the first one that you saw.
No, what he told me that the little boy was killed in front of his mother, but he didn't actually say how he was actually killed. But then, later on, he had told me that it was supposed to be like, they're supposed to be like mutilated, maybe like killed in the, something like killed in the bathroom or something. I don't know for sure.
Okay. And he said that the little boy's body was found when you first opened the front door of the home?
Yes, ma'am.
That was the first one that you saw?
Yeah, that's the first one they're supposed to have found.
Okay. Anyway, though, he told you about a pretty gruesome scene, a woman and her 3 kids getting killed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And even after hearing that, though, you waited for 5 years before you ever told anyone about this. You waited until May of 2017.
Well, DOC, being in prison is a very dangerous place to be giving up any type of information.
Well, you were still in prison, though, when you gave this interview, right?
Yes, but I was the situation that I was in at FSP is it's a lot. It's like Rayford is like one of the most dangerous prisons in DOC in Florida. So, and it wasn't. I want to go ahead on and say something then, but it's like I started hearing like other little stuff concerning the case, like by other people talking about. So I just went ahead and I want to make sure that he hadn't already. I just tried to find out if the case had already been through. So I didn't want to die on death row, because I know Governor Rick Scott, he supposed to have changed the death row, the policy for like execute inmates from, instead of sitting on death row for 20 or 30 years, it's like 5 years. So I didn't want him to die on death row.
Okay, so you waited so long to say something because you were scared if something happened to you in prison.
Well, it wasn't been very safe to do so.
Okay, but you believed Mr. Santos that he put out a hit on this family.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but you're not afraid of him sitting here right now testifying against him? You're not afraid that he's going to do the same to you?
Well, I just say it like this right here. I'm a Muslim. I worship Allah, and if Mr. Santos, if he wants some problems or anybody wants some problems, then I could have. I just say it like this here. it won't be in his best interest to put out a hit on me.
Okay, couldn't a law protect you in prison just like he could protect you now?
No, the law can't protect me in prison like I can be protected now.
Let's talk a little bit about your mental health history. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
I have been in DOC, and I was in different mental health facilities in DOC for going on the past 11 or 12 years.
What specifically were your diagnoses or your issues?
Schizophrenia
Anything else?
and antisocial personality disorder.
What do those mean? What kind of behaviors do you exhibit with those type of diagnoses?
Schizophrenia is like it's like when you, it's like different forms of schizophrenia. Like sometimes like you feel like you have I guess like different powers. Like that's like one form of schizophrenia. Then you got what's called antisocial personality disorder. That's where like you like, I'm kind of like a person. I like to be to myself a lot.
Okay.
I don't go out of my way to try to make friends.
Okay. As far as the schizophrenia, what type of powers are we talking about?
It's just like it's just like you, like for me, my situation is like reincarnation. I read a lot of books. I do a lot of meditating and stuff, like on reincarnation, and I know that everything happens for a reason, and so, and like that's and like I don't want to see him to die in prison for something he didn't do, because he explained to me that he wanted to be able to help him, but he just didn't know how to help him. So, but he was gonna like let him. I guess he was gonna let him die in prison, let him die in the electric chair in a death chamber or whatever. So I wasn't gonna let it go down like that.
What about Baker Acts? Have you ever been Baker Acted?
Yes, they had me Baker at it because they want to try to discredit like this testimony I'm giving to you today.
Okay. When were you last Baker Acted?
This was like a couple of days. Anyway, it was the first time was like around when I was let out of prison, Wednesday, May 31st, 2017.
Okay.
And then this second time.
And that was your first time ever being Baker Acted?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And then how many times have you been Baker Acted since then?
Been one time. That was like on August the 4th this year. Same thing. They just want to try to discredit me. They try to make it look like I'm just paranoid, I'm just delusional, I'm just
What
lying.
specifically were you doing when you were Baker Acted?
I had gave a statement that to law enforcement that they was this little rapper, they call him Lil Boosie. They was planning on having an uprising against law enforcement. They want to kill off all the law enforcement, all the white people, all the first responders, all the judges, all the attorneys, all the military and stuff like that. And it's something they was planning to do.
And that was a rapper that was doing it?
And they still planning on doing it.
Okay, and how did you get that information?
Because they try to like to communicate with me like over the like the radio and stuff like that. And then I have my nephew, a so-called gang member, in my house.
Okay, so there were messages that you believed you were hearing in rap songs that caused you to believe that certain people were being threatened by this rapper?
No, it's what it is that they got this like this little game called Xbox, and so they got like this I guess like satellite radio hooked up to it or whatever. And so then what they was doing is trying to communicate to me to be a part of this little like F the police and stuff like that. But I have family that's in law enforcement, so I didn't want to have no parts in it. So I went ahead and contact TPD, and I had them to come and pick me up.
Okay, so through the Xbox and through the satellite radio, the rappers were communicating with you, and you went and reported that to Tallahassee Police Department.
Yes, I reported it to Tallahassee Police Department because it's also I know about it's other things that's that they have planned. It was supposed to be around this movie that they got that post came out now called Detroit. and they was planning on having an uprising around that movie Detroit that came out on August the 4th. It's something about like they had to call it like National Guard, something that supposed to happen, but it was a movie that supposed to correspond with this uprising against law enforcement.
Now, when you and Mr. Santos were together in prison, were y'all in a specific type of ward there, like a mental health ward, or?
No, it was just a regular CM. I think it might have been CM2, CM1, CM2, something like that.
Okay, had you been in a mental health ward in that prison at some point, or were you put in there at some point?
No, not at that prison.
Okay, what about Mr. Santos?
No, not at that prison.
Did Mr. Santos at any point tell you about his mental health issues?
I didn't know he had it, and he didn't tell me anything about it.
Did he tell you about other murders he'd committed?
No, he didn't tell me about any other murders he committed. He just
Just this one?
He just told me that the little boy was supposed to be some guy named Kilo, son, some drug dealer named Kilo, and it wasn't even supposed to be like his son or whatever.
Okay,
It's just
thank you. That's all.
Supposed to be like Kilo, yeah. All right.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
You can step down.
I'll step down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next witness.
It's time the defense would call Ciesly Timmons.
You remain under oath, Ms. Simmons? You remain under oath. We swore you before. You're still under oath.
Okay.
You can proceed, Mr. Prince.
Ms. Timmons, you were with Brandy Peters.
Start by giving us your name again, please.
Ciesly Timmons.
Could you spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
Ciesly Timmons.
You were with Brandy Peters on the 19th, correct, during the day? Were you with her when she received a letter from a James Carlos Santos that day?
She came to the house after
She brought it to you at the house?
She came to my house with it after she had read it
Okay. You knew Brandy pretty well, correct?
for about 6 months.
You knew her, you knew what she looked like if she was scared or concerned about something? Did she, at some point when she came over to your house, discuss that letter with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was scared when.
Did you see the letter?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
No?
For purposes of this motion hearing, I'll identify this as Defense Exhibit 1. Do you recognize a copy of this envelope? Postmarked November 17th, 2010. Is that the letter that Brandy received on the 19th?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to look at that envelope at the time?
She came to my house with it and I read it.
Did you read it?
Yes.
And what it states on the letter accurately reflects what you recall at the time. Word is bond, bond is life, and a man should give his life before his word fails. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Death before dishonor. Dear Mr. Mailman, if this letter happens to get lost, just send it to heaven, because it's going to an angel. I thank God for you and ask that he look after you and our 3 angels. That's what it said on the outside of the envelope?
Yes.
How did Brandy appear upon reading that envelope?
She was scared.
Are you scared?
Yes.
Who are you scared of?
Carlos Santos.
No further questions for the witness at this time.
Right.
Ms. Timmons, prior to receiving this, you said you'd known Ms. Peters for about 6 months at that point?
Yes.
Prior to her receiving this, isn't it true she'd only really been known Mr. Santos for maybe even a month, not very long, 6 weeks, something like that?
From my understanding, that's the understanding that I got from it.
Okay, didn't know him before all that.
Not that I know of.
Showing you the letter that was written here. Doesn't it also say send me pictures? Given all of that, Brandy, isn't it true that Brandy's concern wasn't so much of her being killed or dying, but more along the lines of being involved with this guy, Carlos Santos, who wants to marry her and all that kind of stuff?
Well, once she was scared about the letter, but before that, I mean, she was just really trying to find out who he was, as far as I know.
So she was looking to figure out who he was at that point?
Yeah.
Had no idea who he was?
She didn't seem to know who he was, but when she got a letter, she was scared.
And that's because the letter talks about weird stuff, weird statements and things like that. Fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of freaked out, kind of like you would if you were on a first date with somebody and then you try to get out of it real quick when they're a little weird, right?
It was crazy.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, thank you, ma'am.
Free direct.
Ms. Timmons, Ms. Peters had prior dealings with Mr. Santos. That's simply not something she discussed with you.
No.
Nor did she discuss with you any drug trafficking activities by her, correct?
No.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
You can step down. Go ahead, next witness.
Defense would call Lisha Garland.
What was that name again?
It's Lisha Garland,
G-A-R.
L-A-N-D, I believe.
Sorry, Your Honor. Can I step out and go to the restroom real quick?
All right, we'll take a few minutes. We'll take about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Could face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Have a seat, please. Slide up the microphone.
Ms. Garland, can you please state and spell both your first and last name for the court reporter?
My name is Lakesha Garland, Lakeisha. Garland, Garland.
You knew victim Brandy Peters?
Yes.
How long did you know her for?
She was my neighbor. I moved into Swakoko Villa 2007, 2008, till up to the time of her death.
You remained friends with her up to the time of her death?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have a daughter that was about the twins' age?
The twins were a little older. The twins
They were a
were
little
older than my daughter.
Okay. Was your daughter friends with the twins?
Yes.
Okay. They used to play together and things of that sort?
Yes.
What about you and Brandy? Were you two close as well?
Yes.
Okay. Did you remain close all the way to the time of her death?
Yes.
Okay. Back when you and Brandy were neighbors in 2008, were you aware of her reputation in the community for being involved in drug trafficking and with drug traffickers?
Yes.
And what was her reputation in the community?
That she had her own drugs she was selling to the community. Of some who were the people, I didn't know. I just knew that she had her own until the time she got with the boyfriend, Kalo.
And what happened at the time she got with Kayla?
He then wanted her to be part of drugs with him, even though Brandy had her own.
What about your own personal knowledge? Did you ever personally witness Brandy engaged in drug sales, cocaine sales?
Yes.
How frequently did that go on?
She had a few people come to her place, and some she'll go off and meet. She wouldn't really want too many people to come to her house.
Okay. What about after she moved? Did you remain aware of her reputation in the community for involvement in drug trafficking?
Yes.
And what was her reputation after she moved?
She knew that some people wanted to get on with her, but she would never let nobody get involved with the situation that she had going on, and she would never invite them to her new place where she was living at. She would always drive off and meet them.
Did you know anything about her having a debt, a drug-related debt?
I heard about it, but her speaking of it word of mouth, no. I just knew that she had a cousin that wanted to get on with her, that wanted to help her with it. She just would never involve him with it. She told him she just didn't want him to get involved. She only wanted to do it on her own.
Okay. When you said that you had heard about her drug debt, that was not from her, that was other members of the community that knew Ms. Peters, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions for the witness at this time.
Cross.
You talking about you were neighbors with her before she moved to the address on Saddle Creek Run?
Yes.
Okay, so back on like Holton Street?
Yes.
Okay. Fair to say, unfortunately, that's a neighborhood that, there's more than one person in there that's selling drugs and stuff like that. Okay. Ms. Peters, in selling these, if she is in fact selling drugs, you said she had a couple of people over there a couple of times, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At any point was she coming out with large suitcases full of narcotics and selling big amounts?
No.
Okay. You're talking about small street level, $20 or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because she would always let them come in-house, not outside.
Okay.
It would never be nothing done outside.
And then when she moved away, she didn't ever want to invite anybody back to her house or any
Nope.
of this stuff, right?
She would never invite nobody to her new place, no. She would
Okay.
always go off.
Kind of distancing herself from all
Yes.
that, getting out of it.
No, she actually would drive off in her car to meet people for the sales. She would never invite them to her new place.
In Tallahassee?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Again, talking about very small levels of stuff, not big suitcases full that you see on TV and stuff like that, right?
Well, I never seen her from of us moving distance. I never seen her do it from there. So I couldn't say from Saddle Creek if she was moving it from there.
Okay, so you're talking about back in 2008 then, when you saw most of it?
Yes.
Okay. After that, you really don't, you just heard of word of mouth?
Yes, but I knew that she still word of mouth, would never invite him to her house. She'll go off and serve away from, because she would never want nobody to come to her new place.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Redirect.
And she ultimately was, to your knowledge, involved with Kalo's drug trafficking activities, correct?
Yes, plus her own.
Plus she had her own source of supply. And Kalo ultimately was caught and sentenced for possession and distribution of large quantities of cocaine, correct?
Yes, but he also, he came to her for some help. Because he told her he hadn't messed up and he needed some help from her. And that was the last conversation. I was around with him, with her.
I understand. No further questions for the witness at this time.
So when did she move away from Holton Street?
2008.
What?
2008.
So it'd been a couple of years that she'd been moved away.
Yes.
How much contact were you having with her between 2008 and 2010?
It was like on and off.
Beg pardon?
It was like on and off.
Phone calls?
Phone calls. She'll come over to my place. I would. We also. She had a birthday party for Vontae.
She had a what?
She had a birthday party for Vontae, so we went to this birthday party that she had for him. And it was just like she mainly would come to my house, to where I moved at.
How many times had you been to her new house?
I haven't been to her new place because she had Vontae party at a park.
So you've never been,
No, Brandy always came to my house.
all right, you can step in. Next witness.
Your Honor, I want to, again, ask the court for a little direction on this. I do have additional witnesses, and those witnesses have not presented their testimony during the course of the trial yet, but they don't bear directly on Mr. Santos. They only relate to time of death. And so I can either proffer that or call them to testify about that, whatever the court prefers.
I don't see where time of death is a big issue in this.
Well, only to the extent that it corroborates Mr. Santos' claim that multiple people were involved and that they committed the offense, as opposed to Mr. Segura. It's circumstantial. It's not direct corroboration. It's circumstantial corroboration of his version of the events.
I mean, you present what you want. I make my ruling. I don't think it's significant, but that's up to you.
Yes, sir. The defense would call Marquis Davis. Step out very briefly.
Come up here, please, sir. Come up here, please, sir. Right up here, witness stand.
Davis, if you could, please state and spell both your first and last name for the court reporter.
Marquis Davis, Marquis Davis, Davis.
Where were you living in November of 2010?
Saddle Creek Run, 901, Saddle Creek Run.
You lived across the street from Brandy Peters and her kids with Ciesly Timmons?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We direct your attention to the evening of November 19th, 2010. Do you recall seeing the twins and Javante that evening?
Yes.
And what were you cooking that evening?
Oxtails, macaroni and cheese, and
Okay. At some point, did you direct Ciesly to see if Brandy wanted some?
yes.
Did she respond to that text?
Yes.
Okay. And did she want any or no?
I sent a plate.
Okay. You sent a plate over?
Yeah.
What about the kids, Javante, Tamaya, and Tanaya?
They ate at our house.
They ate at your house? Would that have been before you texted Brandy, or had Ciesly text Brandy, or afterwards?
It was like during the time they were eating.
During the same time?
Yeah.
Okay. At some point after that, did you decide to take some stew over to your father's house?
Yes.
And about what time did you get back from your father's house?
Around 8:30.
Okay. When you returned back, did you see a vehicle in Brandy Peters' driveway?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle was it?
SUV.
Okay. Had you seen Henry Segura's truck before?
Yeah.
Okay. And the SUV you saw, what color was it?
It's dark blue or black.
Okay. You'd seen Henry Segura's truck before, right?
Yeah.
It had distinctive characteristics?
Yeah. It was an older model pickup. So.
Okay. It has spoiler and fat tires and all that on the back? Did you recognize the vehicle that was parked in Miss Peters' driveway as being a different vehicle than Mr. Segura's vehicle?
I hadn't seen it before.
You hadn't seen it before?
No.
Okay. I have no further questions for the witness at this time.
Cross.
You said you took some dinner to your dad?
Yes.
Where's he live?
He lives on Bermuda Road.
Where?
Bermuda Road.
Where's that at?
It's one street over from North Florida Christian School.
From one street over from North Florida Christian School? So you're
Yeah.
talking about over on the north side of town, almost out
Yeah,
of town?
behind Tallahassee Mall. Yeah.
Okay. And you said that the kids ate at your house around the time you sent that text message,
Yeah.
and then you came back around 8 o'clock?
8:30ish.
Okay. Now, Mr. Davis, you never told law enforcement this information, did you?
No, I didn't.
Law enforcement was there, interviewed your stepson, interviewed Ciesly, obviously are all over the place during all this stuff, and you never once came forward and said, hey, by the way, I might have some information.
I mean, I was there. They never interviewed me.
Then tell them, did you?
No, I didn't just come out and tell them, but they never interviewed me. I was there, but I was working a lot at the time, too.
And this is now 7 years later is the first time you're telling anybody other than the defense this, right?
No, it's not the first time.
You ever told law enforcement before?
No, like I said, no one ever interviewed me about it.
Never told state attorney's office, anybody, have you?
No.
No further question.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
What time was it when you fed the children?
Was around, probably got through cooking around 7:30.
Around 7?
Yeah.
So you weren't gone very long.
No, I just went and took my father something to eat and came straight back.
Okay. And how long was the SUV there?
I'm not sure. Once I got back, I went inside and I didn't
You just saw
I
it
didn't go back.
one time?
I saw it going in
Went
the house.
inside?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, sir. You can step down. Next witness.
This time, the defense will call Officer Candace Jernigan.
Come on up here, please. Would you face the clerk and be sworn, please?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat. Side of the microphone, please.
Officer Jernigan, can you state and spell again your first and last name for the record?
Candace Jernigan, Candice Jernigan.
And I just want to clarify briefly, you were one of the officers who responded to 908 Saddle Creek on the morning of the 20th, correct?
Yes, sir.
And had an opportunity to interview several witnesses who were present on scene.
Yes, sir.
At some point, did you have a chance to talk to Monica Peters?
I did.
Did you talk to her about her last communication with Brandy Peters?
Your Honor, hearsay.
Well, my response, Your Honor, would be that it's a motion hearing, number one, but number two, that witness, Monica Peters, testified.
Look, I'll overrule it for now. We can argue about this as part of the ruling.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Can I refer to my report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
For your reference, I'm looking at page 4 of 7, this second to the bottom paragraph there.
Okay.
Did Ms. Peters indicate that she had talked on the phone with Brandy Peters at 10 o'clock p.m. on the night of the 19th?
She said approximately 10 p.m.
Thank you. Did you also have an opportunity to speak to Shayna and Darius Mount?
I did.
As well as Leon LeVar Scott and Dahana Nelson Scott?
Yes, sir.
I want to ask first about Dahana Nelson Scott. Did she tell you that when she arrived home at 11 p.m., she saw a white SUV in Ms. Peters' driveway? A suburban-like vehicle?
Let me find that. I'm sorry. Between 10:50 and 11
Okay. And she said she saw that vehicle there when she arrived home?
in the drive.
Yes,
sir.
ma'am. And her husband, Leon Scott, he saw the same vehicle same vehicle in Brandy's driveway when he arrived home at about 1 o'clock. Is that right?
Let me see. Do you mind if I read it for a second?
That's
Read
fine.
that?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
I don't recall documenting anything about him seeing the vehicle, just that she had seen it. I don't recall him saying.
Okay. Now, at some point, Ms. Scott told you that she actually called the police because the dog who was in the backyard immediately adjacent to Brandy's house was barking out of control, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that would have been 1:30 in the morning, is that right?
She said she looked at the clock, it was 1:30. She said her clock was fast, so she believed it was around 1:20.
Okay. No further questions at this time.
Cross.
No problem.
All right, you can step down. Next witness.
It's time, Your Honor, the defense will call Darius Mount.
Come on up here, please, sir. Come on up here, please, sir. Stand up here if you would for a second. We're going to put you under oath. Face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Well, have a seat. Slide up the microphone, please, sir.
Mr. Mount, can you please state and spell your first and last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Darius Mount. That's Darius, Mount, Mount.
Where did you live in November of 2010?
3574 Jim Lee Road.
Okay, so you were about 50 yards down from Brandy's house, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At some point that night, did you and your wife Shayna hear the dog over by Brandy's house barking?
We heard what I would call excessive barking coming from that direction. I didn't know if it was their dog or not, but definitely heard what I felt like was out of the ordinary.
Out of the ordinary to the point that the police were at some point called?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Do you remember what time you heard that dog barking at?
No, it's been so long now, I probably need to have my memory refreshed, to be honest with you.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
If I let you review a police report which reflects your initial statement, would that refresh your recollection?
It absolutely would.
Just read that to yourself.
Okay, starting here. On scene.
Just read it. Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yeah, the first part, yes.
Okay. At what time did y'all hear the dog barking and finally decide to call the police?
It would have been probably maybe about 10 minutes before I actually called. Maybe about 10 or 15 minutes before I actually called.
Okay. What time did y'all actually call at?
The time that was stated was like between, I would say about, what was it, 1:30 or something like that?
Yes, sir. No further questions for the witness at this time.
Cross.
No question, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down, sir.
All right, thank you.
Next witness.
No further witnesses at this time, Your Honor.
State, wish to present testimony.
Your Honor, do you want me to make the emails separately provided as part of the record for this hearing, or just rely on the ones that I've already given the court?
Well, I think we need to make them part of the record, because what you gave me yesterday is much more than what was in your motion. And
Yes, sir.
I think some of that may be relevant. And we probably ought to resolve that as part of this part of it, since
Yes, sir.
they're kind of related.
Just to be clear, I think that it'll be easier than just the way that packet was assembled and the way that it came. It included additional emails from Mr. Segura's email address. The email packet that I have here is just emails from the account that witness Santos previously testified he was using to communicate with victim Peters. The emails are numbered. Only 2 of these emails would I intend to introduce into evidence if the court grants the motion. It's the email that's identified as email number 8, which is on the third to last page, and then email number 13, which is on the last page.
Let me see what you got. I'm not sure I'm clear on that.
The emails there are chronologically ordered as opposed to how they were in the packet that I gave the court, which is the way we got it. Because that packet, they were redundant. Every time a new email was sent, it would list all of the prior.
This would be for purposes of this hearing, Defense Exhibit 2.
Yes, sir.
For purposes of this hearing, the state object to Defense Exhibit 2.
Not for the purpose of this hearing, Your Honor.
Okay. If you'd mark that note, please. And Defense Exhibit 1, remind me what that was.
That's the envelope
Okay.
that was discovered from the victim's home. It's already in evidence as part of State Exhibit 98. There's a copy of it.
Okay. I'll admit it for purposes of this hearing. Okay. Do you face the clerk and be sworn, please?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony given in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat. Silence the microphone, please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you please announce your name for the record?
My name is Joshua Rouhle. That is spelled, last name is spelled Ruehle.
Okay. And where do you work?
Work
I'm
for the
sorry, I
Italian.
missed your name, sir.
First name is Joshua, Joshua. Last name is Rouhle, Ruehle. And I'm currently employed by the Tallahassee Police Department.
What are your duties there at Tallahassee Police Department?
Currently a sworn investigator.
Okay. As a sworn investigator, do you also have involvement with gang activity specialists?
In my previous assignments at the department, I've had work gangs, and I still do have times come into work and assist with gang-related issues.
In order to work your previous assignment and then your occasional one now, to work with those gangs, did you have an occasion for specialized training, experience, and things like that?
Yes, I did.
What are they?
I've taken basic, advanced, and intermediate classes. I've attended at least 7 different workshops put on by the Florida Gang Investigator Association, which puts me at in excess of 300 hours of specialized gang training.
As I understand, I guess a lot of the gang membership aspects, and I don't mean membership being the members of the gangs, I'm talking about the law enforcement memberships. There's a lot of communication between different agencies throughout the entire state, in fact, throughout the country.
That is correct.
Okay. My understanding is there are regular gang conferences and stuff where everybody gets together and talks about gang activity throughout the course of Florida and things along those lines.
That is correct.
Okay. Did you regularly attend those kind of meetings and things like that?
Yes, I did. I attended those as a attendee, as well as worked as a regional director to help put one of those on. I've been to approximately 7 different conferences over 7 years.
During your experience there as involving the gang investigations, did you become aware of a gang out of Chicago called the Vice Lords?
Yes, I have.
What is your generalized knowledge of the Vice Lords?
My generalized knowledge is they are a recognized gang that did start in Chicago and spread throughout the United States. They are part of one of the nations that I'm familiar with, but my first experience has been very minimal to no activity within Tallahassee.
Okay. Again, let's talk about that if we can. That my understanding is, again, that there are multiple different communications between the agencies regarding gang activity. Why is that so important?
Gangs move from place to place, state to state. Sometimes they share their method of doing things. So we want to know who's moving around the nation as well as who's becoming active in certain areas.
As a law enforcement agency, would you regularly report certain kind of gang activity if you were identified a member of a gang into some sort of database or something like that?
Yes, we do have databases, yes, sir.
Okay, and are those databases shared with other law enforcement agencies?
Some of those are, yes, sir.
And other law enforcement offices agencies would have similar rules and regulations where they would do the reporting and sharing information?
That is correct.
As your knowledge in the gang activity, do you have any knowledge of activity of the Vice Lords in the city of Tallahassee at any time?
Active, no, not from that side. There's two people who were local who tried to say that, but there is disproven. They cannot prove any true links to them. It was more of a parroting, I believe.
It's more of a what?
A parroting, or if they saw that or learned it from somewhere else, but they were identified truly as a local hybrid gang member that had no ties outside of Tallahassee or no true ties to a nationally known gang.
And who would those be?
I believe one's last name is Farmer, and Joshua McKinney is the other one.
Okay. At any point, did you have knowledge about Carlos Santos being involved here?
No, I am not. I
Okay.
do not.
Do you have anything knowledge about Carlos Santos being involved in the vice lords at all?
No, I do not.
Okay. And again, would you have that knowledge if he was reported?
Yes, I would.
Okay. No further questions.
Cross.
No cross, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down, sir.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Your Honor, this state would call case in order.
Please, the clerk can be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Have a seat. Slide up the microphone, please, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please announce your name for the record?
Jason Nulan, Jasonnewlin.
And where do you work?
I'm an investigator at the State Attorney's Office.
Okay. And how long have you been a law enforcement officer?
Going on 15 years.
And how long have you been with the State Attorney's Office?
Going on 8 years.
Are you also essentially cross-sworn with the United States Marshal Service?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And your duties at the State Attorney's Office, did you become involved in an investigation regarding the death of Brandy Peters and her children?
Yes, I did.
And during the course of that investigation, did you have occasion to have contact with Mr. Carlos Santos?
Yes, I did.
Okay. When did you first have contact with Mr. Santos?
First time I ever interviewed him was October 18th, 2012.
Whenever you were talking and interviewed Mr. Santos, did you ask if he knew anything, had any knowledge or anything having to do with the death of Brandy Peters?
Yes, I did.
And was he able to give you any information at that time?
He told me that a guy named Leon Smith out of the Vice Lords out of Chicago killed Brandy Peters.
Okay. And did he say anything about what his involvement, being Mr. Santos' involvement, was in that?
No, he did not. He just said he heard it.
He had heard it?
Correct.
Okay. Did he give you any information about where he heard it from?
Just through his secretary. He wouldn't give me her name.
Okay. Throughout the course of this investigation, have you had many dealings with Mr. Santos?
Yes, I have.
And if you can, tell the court what those dealings are, what we're talking about.
Again, I interviewed him in June 18th, 2015 at the Leon County Jail. There were several of us present at that one. Mr. Santos just went through how he knows Brandy, that he met her through Kalo. Met her right before she had the youngest son. Thought Kalo was the youngest son's father. Told me he knew her for 6 to 8 years. Said he met her at the Wendy's parking lot in Tallahassee. And he said, Kalo said she would do business for him. So he told me he'd been in prison since 2004. Said he stayed in contact through his Mexican friend Carlos. He couldn't give me a last name of Carlos. Said Brandy owed people money. Last time he saw Carlos was in 2001. Said she did business with a friend of his named Terry White. Said she kept coming up selling dope. He did tell me his secretary's name this time was Selena Alderman, that she communicated with people. Says he met Kalo in 2000, paid Brandy between $8,000 and $20,000. Said Brandy drove nice cars and wore designer clothes.
Now, given the fact that you were involved in the homicide investigation, first of all, start with the nice cars, nice clothes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You seen the crime scene photos?
I have.
Evidence of nice cars, nice clothes?
I have.
Is there any evidence of nice cars or nice clothes on Ms. Peters?
No, there's not.
That'd be an inconsistency you were able to identify as it relates to Mr. Santos' statement.
Yes, it was.
Okay. During the course of the investigation, did you learn that Mrs. Peters was actually on some sort of substitute income by the government?
Yes, I did.
Okay. again, be inconsistent with the amount of money that Mr. Santos is saying that would happen? You would pay her?
Correct, it was very inconsistent.
Okay. Do you have any other follow-up investigation that Mr. Santos gave you regarding information or whatever you could follow?
In the rest of that interview, Mr. Santos started talking about a murder that he committed in Paducah, Kentucky. We actually stopped the interview because there was a defense attorney present, so we informed him of his rights, and he continued to talk about a murder that he committed in Paducah, Kentucky, which was later confirmed to have never occurred.
And in fact, Mr. Santos, a couple weeks ago on the stand, admitted that he lied about that murder, correct?
Correct.
Did he also talk about another murder that he was involved with regarding a law enforcement officer in Atlanta?
Through another investigation, yes, I discovered where he was the subject of an investigation into the homicide of an Atlanta police officer in 1999. He was interviewed by the FBI in 2000 while incarcerated in Las Vegas. They realized that he actually admitted to committing the murder and said he was in the shootout with the police officer, but when they realized he was actually in custody at the time of the homicide, they couldn't charge him for that one either.
Okay, let me understand it. He says, I was involved in a shootout with this law enforcement officer, and that's actually a true case.
Correct. There is a true case. Officer Kinchin, Deputy Kinchin, was killed.
Okay. But during the course of the investigation, and you weren't involved in that investigation, correct?
No, I was not.
Okay. My understanding is the Federal Bureau of Investigations and Georgia Bureau of Investigations were involved.
Correct. And other local agencies.
And you talked to the agent that was involved in the FBI agent that was involved in that?
Yes, the one that interviewed Santos. Well, he was Otis Jackson at the time, actually.
Okay, so he went by a different name at the time?
He had a totally different name at the time, yes.
And that was what?
Otis Jackson.
And during the course of that discussion with the FBI agent, as well as, I assume you got some documentation that showed that Mr. Santos was actually incarcerated during the time of that homicide?
Yes, I did get a judgment and sentence from Nevada that had Mr. Santos sentenced to prison in 1997 with a release date in 2000.
That judgment and sentence, did that give any indication about possible mental illnesses of Mr. Santos? Or Mr. Jackson, I guess.
That Mr. Jackson at the time was schizophrenic.
Okay. At some point, did you talk to or ask questions of Mr. Santos regarding Angel Avila?
Several times, actually. I went down on February 3rd of 2015 after we received a sworn statement. Actually, let me go back to the one in June 18th of 15 where we interviewed him. We actually produced a picture of Angel Avila that we've received from the immigration A file.
Now, who was there at this meeting? You're saying we.
Myself, Chuck Hobbs, John Epstein, Mark Lewis.
And my understanding is Mr. Hobbs and Mr. Epstein were actually on the defense team for Mr. Segura.
Correct.
Okay, so this was in furtherance of the Henry Segura, I guess, preparation for trial or whatnot?
Correct.
Okay. And, okay, so you showed a picture, or had a picture there of Mr. Avila?
We did.
And you showed it to Mr. Santos?
Correct.
And did he indicate he knew Mr. Avila?
He'd never seen him before in his life.
Did he say anything about knowing Angel Avila, the name?
No, we showed the picture first without giving him the name, and then we got into asking him if he'd ever heard of Angel Avila Quinones. He said, I know a Quinones, but I don't know an Angel Avila Quinones. No.
Okay. All right. And was there subsequent interviews? I think you were talking about other interviews.
Yeah, we did. I did another one. I say February 3rd of 15. It was February 3rd of 2016 where I actually had to go interview him at Tomoka CI after we received a sworn statement from the defense in this case.
Okay. And in that one, I believe Mr. Santos changed his information and said that he now knew Angel Avila.
He did, yes. He changed it to say he now knew Angel Avila, that he met Angel Avila somehow in the late 90s, early 2000s when he was incarcerated. But he told me he met him in Texas. He actually told me that that was not him that was arrested in Las Vegas on the case. That was not him that was interviewed by FBI in Las Vegas. He's contesting that entire conviction.
I'm sorry, Mr. Santos / Mr. Jackson says that he wasn't the one that was out there.
Correct. He says that was not him.
Okay.
He challenged me to prove it. he tried to tell me he used aliases, which is why I asked him if you were Otis Jackson at one time. And he said, yes, that was an alias I used, but that was not me in Las Vegas. He said he would use aliases because this was confusing. To get a visitor on your list, you have to be a relative. So he would use aliases to create names and get visitors on his list. I couldn't follow what he was trying to tell me, which is what he tried to say, how he met Brandy and why he somehow moved to Tallahassee. I'd have to play that's literally how it came out to me. I was confused. I didn't understand what he was trying to tell me.
So he's saying he got moved to Tallahassee in some way to help him meet Brandy?
Correct. To get back to Brandy. It was confusing. I couldn't follow what he was trying to say.
Okay. So. Based upon the information of him providing regarding Angel Avila, did you go back and get access to, or have a file sent to you from from ICE, the agency that controls the?
Yes, the federal government, several different branches, but mostly was the U.S. Marshals helped me get an ICE file.
What is an ICE file?
It's an immigration file. The file contains the deportation status of Angel Avila. I also did a migrant movement status request on Angel Avila to figure out anytime his passport was checked, anytime he came in and out of any country.
And when is the last time, based upon that information, when is the last time that Mr. Avila was present in the United States of America?
He left in 2009. If I had the document in front of me, I could tell you the flight number and the time he landed in Bogota, Colombia.
So the information you provided not only said the date, but gave the actual flight and the whole and everything about that.
It comes with a 10-print card. It comes with a photograph. It comes
What's a 10-print card?
Fingerprint card.
Okay.
It comes with the photograph of the subject. It puts the date and time and the flight number for the flight that he leaves on from America, as well as the the time that he lands at the country of the destination. And he left from America and landed in Bogota, Colombia.
Okay. And it's my understanding that during the course of this preparation of trial, because of the allegations, there's actually been some efforts made to contact Mr. Avila.
Yes, we actually, through the migratory movement status, we found where Mr. Avila had moved to Italy. We reached out to the Italian authorities. They made contact with Mr. Avila, who provided them with his cell phone and email address, and we contacted him, and we actually had interviewed him twice via the telephone and sent an FBI agent and met him in person at the embassy in Rome.
Why would you have to send an FBI agent versus asking Mr. Avila or flying him back here?
The Italian rules are a little different. We can't bring him back because of his conviction. We would have to put him in custody to bring him back.
So he can't enter the country?
He can't enter the country correctly, no.
Okay. Did he cooperate with law enforcement?
He did. He spoke with us twice. He gave us his schedule to allow us to know which time to call him. And then he agreed to ride on a train from Trieste, I don't know how you say it, Italy, on a 4-hour train ride down to the embassy, where he met with Special Agent Pat Sanford at the embassy and interviewed for several hours.
One moment. No,
Ross? Very briefly, regarding your June 18th, 2015 interview with Santos, when you and Mr. Hobbs and Epstein and y'all went and talked to him, is it your testimony that he didn't have any information at all about Angel Antonio Avila Quinones?
He denied knowing him and denied knowing the photograph of him as well.
Who did he say Quinones was to him?
He just knew somebody named Quinones. I don't have specifically who it said he was.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Let the record reflect I'm showing the branch with that name.
Do you want me to read it?
You don't have to read it.
Okay. Yeah.
So he actually did tell you during that interview that Quinones he knew was a drug trafficker, correct?
Correct.
Who brought drugs through Mexico to Atlanta, correct?
He was a Mexican that trafficked drugs through Atlanta, yes.
The interview that you conducted with Mr. Avila, isn't it true that the very first thing that was explained to him during the phone interview was that there had been a mistake with the DNA?
Yes.
Okay, no further questions.
Pretty direct. Hang on. Is somebody going to talk about what Avila said?
Mr. Nulan, can he conduct that part of the interview, Mr. Nulan?
Mr. Avila said he's been to America twice. Once was prior to the time when he got arrested on the boat. That was the first time he was in America was because his boat broke down. He left immediately. The second time was when he got arrested. He was arrested in the Pacific Ocean for trafficking drugs. The only reason his case was tried in Florida was because the federal system took that case and moved it to Florida. He was initially sentenced to, I think it was 30 years in prison, and then his sentence was reduced to 10, and he was released. Once he left the country, he went straight back to Colombia. The lady he was married to at the time of his arrest actually moved to Italy, so when he got out, he moved back over. He found her, went and has lived with her ever since. He checked in with Italy with the Italian authorities. He actually has to do that on a regular basis because of his visa. He left Italy one time in 2013 to go back to Colombia to help a relative build a house for a couple of weeks, and then he went back to Italy, and he's been there. He works almost all day, every day. He was a student. He still is a student. He's a baker, and he's a maintenance worker. He provided me with certificates with documents of paying his rent routinely, with his schedules of employment, with his class schedules, as well as record certificate to say all of through 2010 he was attending class and working in Italy.
Did you go back also and look at as I understand it, the federal government, when they sentence somebody, they have to put forth a factual statement about what transpired for someone's sentences. Did you go back and look at the one for Mr. Avila?
I did.
And did you confirm at least what he was telling you about what was his arrest and the nature of his arrest?
Yes, I did.
And did that confirm that, in fact, he was arrested in the Philippines by the United States Coast Guard?
Correct.
And then transported back to the United States?
Correct.
Okay. Other than that, had no involvement or nothing going on in the United States other than that one time that the boat broke down?
He said he would never come back to America. He has no desire to ever come back over here.
So when does he indicate he was last in the States?
When he left on the plane, I believe it was out of Louisiana and landed in Bogota, Colombia in 2009.
Any cross? Sprint?
I suppose so, yes, sir. All right, so with respect to the offense characteristics, the nature of the offense he was arrested for was nearly $100 million worth of cocaine, right?
What he told us was he was on a boat that contained 5 tons of cocaine. He actually did not know the captain of the boat that he was on, but he went down for it.
He was the captain, correct?
I don't know if he was a captain or not. He may not have known the owner or whoever sent it was, but he didn't know.
Have you read the statement of facts relative to his federal case?
Just the fact that it was 5 tons of cocaine.
Didn't they call those cases, there was a series of them, the ship captain cases?
I have no idea.
Okay. Now, when he got back to Colombia, he claimed to be broke, right?
I don't know.
You don't remember that?
That he was broke?
Right.
He'd been in prison for 10 years.
Right. And his wife was working as a tutor or something in Italy, right?
She'd moved to Italy, yes.
Working like as a tutor. It's not like she was a
I
CEO.
I don't recall exactly what she was doing.
Okay. Somehow he gets the money together for a transatlantic flight over to Italy, correct?
I don't know how he got to. I know he flew to Italy.
Mm-hmm. At some point, his passport was stamped as having been in Spain as well, right?
I think if it was, I'd have to look back at the emails between me and the U.S. Marshals. I know it got stamped twice. I do know that.
And he claimed to be unemployed when he first got to Italy because he couldn't get a work visa, right?
Correct.
And again, his wife was still doing whatever she was doing to make ends meet. But he got another round-trip transatlantic flight back to Colombia within short order, correct?
Probably 3 years later.
Mm-hmm. Now, the records that you referenced regarding his class schedule, those weren't like daily sign-in sheets, correct? It was just This is his class schedule, this is his work schedule, right?
I'd have to look at him to see again.
No further questions.
Redirect. All right, you can step down. Very next witness.
Your Honor, we can pause for just a minute. I just got some information about a potential other witness that maybe.
Say what?
Can we pause for just a minute? I got some new information on a potential new witness that is really new regarding Mr. Santos.
What do you want to do?
Take a 5-minute break.
5-minute break, Your Honor, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's do.
And that would be the doctor's report as to Mr. Santos's mental illness or mental capacity.
Both the Dr. Hudson's reports.
Yes, sir.
Okay. They are part of the record and be considered as part of the record for this hearing. All right, y'all want to make argument?
Your Honor, I'll just summarize. I don't want to talk just to talk. The court has had an opportunity to read the case law that I've supplied. That's essentially what my argument is that the defendant has a Sixth Amendment and 14th Amendment right to put before the jury evidence that someone else has confessed to committing the crime, that his right to do so is superior to any concern about hearsay. The case law all makes that clear, and that it is inappropriate to engage in a reliability, a credibility analysis when determining the admissibility of that confession. The state's free to impeach him with properly admissible evidence if the court decides to admit the transcript of the motion in limine hearing, but the weight of that confession is something that the jury should consider. That is essentially the defense in this case. We shouldn't be relegated to arguing reasonable doubt in the jury when there is an alternative explanation that is corroborated by all types of evidence, physical evidence, forensic evidence, circumstantial evidence. It should be up to the jury to decide the credibility of the confession.
What a comment on the emails. I guess the letter is already in evidence, so that's not really an issue. It's
Yes, sir.
Emails.
The emails, I would suggest, are admissible for two reasons. Although one of them is not really my reason, I'm just going to speak to it because the court has routinely, in discussing the issue, mentioned that it seems to be going to state of mind. That's not really, although I suppose it necessarily glances that on the way to my point. But to the extent it would be for state of mind, I would suggest that it's exactly like circumstances when the defense is that a victim committed suicide. Essentially what we are claiming here is that the victim's own choices about associations, her own conduct, is what ultimately caused her death. Choosing to be involved in a drug trafficking organization with a dangerous person is what caused her death here. And to the extent that it is state of mind, just as in those suicide cases where all of the case law says it's proper to admit statements regarding a victim's state of mind, it would likewise be proper here. My real point, however, in admitting the emails is that it's corroborative of Santos' claim that he is involved in some sort of drug trafficking organization and scheme with Brandy. The fact that she is acknowledging a clear and present danger exists for herself and her children as a result of whatever that arrangement or interaction is with Santos corroborates directly his testimony, and I would submit, in light of the disputes about what the DNA shows, is the most compelling piece of corroboration. And on that basis, I would say that the defendant likewise has a 6th and 14th Amendment right to introduce that evidence in order for the jury to make fair consideration of Santos' confession.
Mr. Fuchs.
The problem with the corroboration, Your Honor, is that the only person that corroborates it is another statement by Mr. Santos. And you can't corroborate your own statement by your own statement. And that's exactly what's trying to happen here is that as to the emails that were just discussed, the only way they corroborate Mr. Carlos's statement, or Mr. Santos' statement, is if we use Mr. Santos' interpretation of those emails. We don't have Ms. Peters here to say what she thought those emails were about. And on their face, they don't. There is different, obviously, up to interpretation. Mr. Santos seems to put a spin on it that this is a code word and that's a code word and things along those lines. And there's just no way to corroborate that outside of Mr. Santos' statement. As it relates to the hearing that we just had regarding the testimony, again, the only thing that corroborated Mr. Santos' statement was his statement to another person, and a statement to another person. There's nothing evidentiary-wise that corroborates any of those statements, and in fact, that goes directly against that Mr. Avila was deported, wasn't involved in this thing. In addition to that, the fact that Mr. Santos has previously confessed to 2 other murders, one of which was high publicity. We have a high publicity one here, and he is self-admitted that he was lying about confessing to the murder in Kentucky. We know he was lying about the murder as it related to the law enforcement officer up in Atlanta because he was incarcerated at the time and could not have committed that particular murder. And now here we are in a third murder that he's confessing to, and of course the state would submit that he is, there's nothing that substantiates his statement. There's nothing that even the witnesses we heard here. Even if you do believe that Ms. Peters was in fact selling narcotics, as Ms. Garland said, it still is a very, very small amount of money. Whereas Mr. Santos is saying that she was bringing all this money, all this drugs in from Brownsville, Texas to Atlanta and getting paid for it. At no point did he say she was selling narcotics. It was that she was bringing it transporting it to and from these locations. So even that doesn't corroborate Mr. Santos' story. But the biggest issue we have, there's obviously always a balancing act between the court that the court must do as it relates to testimony that's put before it. Clearly, the court cannot judge the credibility of a particular witness. That is the job of the jury, and there are case laws out there that talks about the court cannot sit there as a person and judge the credibility of a particular person. However, it is the gatekeeper for reliable testimony. And that is testimony when you take it as a whole, not just judging the person that's making the statement, but when you take the testimony as a whole in its entirety and judge it against facts, other facts and evidence, or would potentially be in evidence, judge it by the evaluation we have of the doctor in this particular case as to the mental illness of Mr. Santos, the fact that he is grandiose, he lives in fantasy, and narcissistic in that he wants to bring the attention to himself. You take that in addition to all the other information, you take it as a whole, and the testimony on its face as a whole is unreliable. And even then, when we look at this even further, and the court's inclination, as we talked about earlier, of what are the identifier of the issues, none of the witnesses that we heard from identify or deal with those issues that the court properly put forth. Those, of course, were the argument of the state. As it relates to due process, there has to be, chambers has to be met, and in that particular situation, it talks about the cross-examination. In that particular case, if you're going under the due process and under chambers, there has to be an availability for cross-examination. Under admission of against penal interest, again, there has to be available for cross-examination. And then if you go to former testimony, that's a little bit more lenient in some ways. However, as the court's already put forth, unfortunately the state during the cross-examination of Mr. Santos was cut off by Your Honor, and we weren't able to fully do the cross-examination of Mr. Santos. In addition to that, you look at Earhart 8042, and it talks about in a situation where matters affecting the credibility that did not occur until after the first trial, or in this particular case, hearing, which would be the testimony of Mr. Santos, may result in the earlier cross-examination being insufficient to test the credibility when the testimony is offered at a subsequent trial. And that's exactly what we have here. For a long time, we've been trying to get mental illness, evaluations and things like that were done on Mr. Santos. We had reason to believe he was in fact schizophrenic. We tried to explore that through whether or not there was a PSI information that was done when he was sentenced for federal court. Eventually, when we were told it didn't have it, nobody had it. In this particular case, we end up in a situation, of course, up till a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Santos had been saying that Leon Smith was the one that committed this, and he just had heard it through the grapevine, essentially. Well, all that changed a couple of weeks ago, and of course now Mr. Santos' statement was no longer hearsay of what he had heard, but it became, I was directly involved in this, and it changed everything as it relates to Mr. Santos' previous statement. So you take that, And now all of a sudden we start looking towards cross-examination that we were able to do during that hearing, and we did not have the information available to us that was subsequently done on his evaluation by the doctor, I think it was Dr. Hudson in this particular case, for us to utilize that during cross-examination. And given the results of that doctor, and given the fact that he was, the findings of the narcissism and the delusional aspects of Mr. Santos in confessing to multiple times to multiple murders that he didn't or could not have done, that was not available for the state for cross-examination during that hearing and the testimony of Mr. Santos at that particular time. I would submit to Your Honor that that certainly is a matter that affects the credibility of Mr. Santos' statement that we would have liked to have had cross-examination on, and it would in fact something that we weren't able to do, and it certainly should affect the credibility of Mr. Santos' statement, and it is not a cross-examination we were able to do, and it should render the prior cross-examination that we were able to do insufficient for purposes of admitting that that testimony at a later hearing or later trial.
Further, Mr. Prince?
Only if the court wants me to address a specific point.
Fairly confused set of circumstances, but ultimately, bottom line is I am not going to allow the hearsay statements of Mr. Santos. I am not going to allow into evidence the emails. Let me analyze how I've arrived at that. First, as to the emails, I think that's the simplest. They're strictly to show the state of mind of the victim. They are not admissible. The state of mind of the victim is not relevant. The fact she was scared of something only goes to her state of mind. There is no other exception that applies, and they're hearsay. If you look at them, I mean, they could be construed in a number of different ways. And that, you know, if you look at the first email in the chain, essentially you got Mr. Santos proposing some kind of Nigerian fraud scheme and all the wonderful reward the victim is going to get from taking part in this fraud scheme. So I don't know what those emails were intended to mean. I think they could be construed in a lot of different ways. But again, I think they strictly go to the state of mind of the victim, which is not relevant. As to Mr. Santos, I've outlined there are 3 potential ways it could be admissible under 90.804 sub 4 as an admission against interest. The statute provides a statement tending to expose the declarant, which would be Santos, to criminal liability and offered to exculpate the accused is inadmissible unless corroborating circumstances show the trustworthiness of the statement. I find the circumstances totally undercut the trustworthiness of the statement. Frankly, I'm not sure that anybody would believe what Mr. Santos said. Frankly, we don't know what he'd say until he got on the stand. He's given 4 or 5 different versions of what he has to say, and we'll go through that just a little bit more. The due process issue, the Chambers analysis, and I've read all the cases provided by the defense and gone back through them. Chambers provided a 4-step analysis to decide whether the evidence should be admissible. The Florida Supreme Court has since made clear that that's not, I forget what their wording was, but essentially not etched in stone that those are the only ways they're admissible. Ultimately, it's a decision whether there is sufficient indicia of reliability to make them admissible. but each of the factors, to me, would cut against the admission of them under Chambers. First, whether it was spontaneous. The earliest version we have is what was given to Mr. Whitfield back in the summer of 2012, which is 7 to 9 months after the murder. Certainly not spontaneous, not to a close acquaintance. As Chambers said, a statement made spontaneously to a close acquaintance shortly after the crime occurred. That's certainly not the case here. Now, I think the defense has gotten a little mixed up in what the cases say as to whose credibility I determine. I think the case is real clear. I cannot determine the credibility of Mr. Whitfield. That would be for the jury to do, but it is absolutely my duty to attempt to make some determination as to the reliability of Mr. Santos' statement. I don't make any determination as to Mr. Whitfield's credibility, although he certainly would have some problems. But the problem with that statement is it directly contradicts the physical evidence in the case. Says that the door was left open, the boy was the first one killed, he was the one inside the door, that was the first person the police found. All that is clearly inconsistent with the facts of the case. The second, and it really kind of goes into the second criteria, the statement is corroborated by other evidence in the case. Neither the statement made by Mr. Whitfield nor the more recent statement made by Mr. Santos in court is corroborated by the physical evidence in the case. The statement was self-incriminatory and unquestionably against interest. That may be the case, although there has been thrown out the possibility that Mr. Santos was under the belief that that statement could not be used against him to prosecute him, which would undermine that. But I think on balance, I would have to say factor 3 is only one of the factors that's been shown to be established. And then the last factor, of which I think is the more critical of them, if there's any question about the truthfulness of the out-of-court statement, the declarant must be available for cross-examination. A basic tenet of our legal system has been to allow the parties the ability to cross-examine a declarant. Allowing this would prevent the state from having any ability to cross-examine the declarant. I think that's an important factor. To cut into the reliability of the statement, we've made various statements to law enforcement in Gordon, including what Investigator Nulan has said. His prior testimony from March 3rd, 2014, which should be made part of the record, I think it is already part of the record, to Judge Fulford was 180 degrees from what he said in front of me recently. The reports of Dr. Hudson, although he found him to be someone who could tell the truth, basically was a grandiose personality person with a certain agenda. I think all those cut against this being a testimony. It certainly suggests that there are questions as to the truthfulness of the out-of-court statement, and ultimately I find that there is little indicia of reliability to what Mr. Santos has to say. I guess the last theory would be the former testimony theory. Again, I've already listed or already commented on that. Fortunately or unfortunately, I cut off the cross-examination of the state. That was not intentional. I had no idea we would be considering the prior testimony of Mr. Santos at the time. But I think legally the only issue before the court was legal admissibility, so credibility was not an issue. It'd be grossly unfair to let the statement go to the jury without the state having the ability to cross-examine and show the various inconsistencies that Mr. Santos has made. All of these rulings are subject to review or reconsideration, I guess would be the better word, should we get into a death penalty proceeding. In a death penalty proceeding, there is a more relaxed standard of evidence. My rulings may not apply to that stage of the proceeding if we get to that. I think the next thing we need to resolve is the statements made to Mr. Washington by Mr. Paramore. We ready to do that?
Your Honor, if I can real quick, the court had mentioned that it was 8 months from the statement of Mr. Whitfield from summer of 2012. The murders actually happened in November of 2010. That is almost 18 months.
Okay.
So
My
it's
years
about
were
that.
off. You're correct. It was summer of 2012 is when the statement was made to Mr. Whitfield.
Yes, sir.
My math is not very good. Thank you for correcting that, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Hughes.
And finally, is there any finding as it relates to the new information not subject to the not available to the state for cross-examination of Mr. Santos at the time of the hearing?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's the the report from Dr. Hudson is subsequent to the cross-examination at that particular hearing. The state did not have it available.
Well, I mean, I think there were many areas of cross-examination that you could have used, and like I say, I think it'd be grossly unfair not to let you have cross-examination. Mr. Santos, frankly, after a proper cross-examination, I don't think anybody would believe Mr. Santos. But anyway, that's my ruling. We ready on, you have Washington available? All right, we're going to start with Mr. Washington. Mr. Prince, you want to start with Washington?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Your Honor, did you want to, at some point, are you going to address Dr. Dela Cruz's testimony to admissibility?
Okay, I'm sorry. You had an argument as to its admissibility. I thought Mr. Fuchs was going to wrap that into any closing argument, but what was your theory on that?
The theory is set forth in the motion.
Well, I never saw your motion, so it's a little hard for me to know what your theory was.
Okay, but basically.
Things go to the clerk's office, and 3 days later, I see them. Okay?
The motion in limine basically indicated that there was not a basis in Dahlberg Fry for a scientific opinion, that was all based upon opinion, hearsay, things he read off the internet, and so that that it would not qualify and excluded as testimony both in this hearing and at trial should it be submitted.
Well, I'm not going to decide whether it's admissible at trial at this point in time. If you'll give me a copy of your motion in limine, I'll consider it. Frankly, I didn't put much credence in what the testimony that was presented. It was basically based upon Mr. Santos' statement, so it kind of begged the question. But give me your motion in limine. I'll rule on that prior to trial. Swear the witness.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Washington, please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Gregory Jerome Washington. Last name spelled Washington.
You know somebody named Paramore Griffin, Demario Paramore, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is his relationship to you?
We call ourselves cousins.
Okay. You were close with him back in 2010?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At some point prior to you going and talking to the Tallahassee Police Department about what he had said, did Mr. Paramore make statements to you about Brandy Peters and her children's murder?
Yes, sir.
And what did he tell you?
He told me that him and Haywood Griffin killed the family.
And did he say why that they did that?
Basically, he said that because they owed it money and they were playing games and stuff like that with the money, with dope.
Did he mention specifically that he and Mr. Griffin had fronted Ms. Peters drugs that she had not paid them back for?
I believe so, yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Did he tell you why they had killed the children?
They ain't want to leave no witness behind.
Okay. At some point later, you were documented by the Tallahassee Police Department as a confidential informant?
Yes, sir.
And after you were documented, you were working with the Tallahassee Police Department investigator, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in the course of working with that investigator, did they affix you with a listening device, a wire for lack of a better term, and send you back to talk to Mr. Paramore again?
Yes, sir.
In the conversation that you had with him the second time, did he essentially say the same thing in response to your question?
Yes, but he basically admitted, at one point in time, he admitted to, first when we was doing it, he told me outside of the wire that him and Haywood Griffin committed murder. Then over a couple of transactions I did with him, he never mentioned until the last transaction I did actually with him. He basically said, yes, me and Wood killed the family on wire. But before that, he never mentioned it on wire. But when I went in the wire, the last time I did the drug transaction, he admitted to committing the murder on wire.
And did he give the same reason for killing the children on wire?
I don't recall.
Okay. No further questions at this time.
Right.
Mr. Washington, you've kind of made a career out of being a snitch, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
When all this stuff happened back in 2010, you were on the phone trying to actually call me and other members of the state attorney's office on it was a daily basis, multiple times a day, were you not?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that you were actually banned from calling the state attorney's office because your information was so unreliable at that time?
Yes, sir.
And we cut off your phone record, your phone stuff at the jails because of that information, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then this one came forth, and because of the importance of this case, we actually agreed to allow you to wear a wire.
Yes, sir.
All right? And it's because you told us that Mr. Paramore had said this to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and just for clarification, it was Mr. Paramore that said it, not Mr. Griffin, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay? And then you wore that wire on this time, and you did a multiple series of buys, and you never could really get him to say anything, and we'll get to the last one in the first couple of times you tried to do it, right?
True.
And then the last time you said it, you actually just kept hitting him and hitting him and hitting him and hitting him with it, and finally he said, you asked him about the kids, and he said, I guess they couldn't leave witnesses.
Yes, sir.
Never said I did it. He just simply said the kids were killed because they couldn't leave witnesses. Isn't that
Yes,
what he
sir.
said? Isn't that what he said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No further questions.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Right, you can step down. Who would be next?
Investigator Vinny Bazio.
What were you asking, Deputy?
May I step back, Your Honor?
If you face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony given in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Investigator Bazio, can you introduce yourself, spelling your first and last name for the court reporter, please?
Sure. My first name is Vincent Bascio, B as in boy, O, C-C-I-O.
Okay. At some point in March of 2011, you and Investigator Roberts, Tallahassee Police Department, documented Gregory Washington as a confidential informant to use in the Brandy Peters murder investigation, correct?
That is correct.
That was based on him relaying to you all that his cousin, person he called his cousin, DeMario Paramore, had confessed to committing the murders, right?
That's correct.
Okay. At some point, was he documented, and did you wire him to go talk to Mr. Paramore?
Yes.
During the course of those recorded conversations, Did Mr. Paramore allude to the fact that he had some participation in the murders?
He made a comment about it.
That's a yes then?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did Paramore actually state that you don't leave witnesses, dead men don't talk?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Cross.
Subsequent to that, Mr. Paramore was called in and did an interview, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and at which point he told you that he didn't really have a phone during that time period, but he utilized his girlfriend's and his, I think it was his brother's phone during that time period.
That is correct.
And also during this time period, law enforcement went out and got surveillance videos and stuff like that, and there's nothing that indicates in any way, shape, or form that Mr. Paramore was involved in this particular homicide, is there?
Nope, that's correct.
Mr. Griffin, no information at all that he was involved in this homicide?
That is correct.
Redirect.
Detective Bassi, you had initially stated that he was corroborated by alibi witnesses, DNA, and cell phone data, Mr. Paramore, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But you guys never actually got a chance to go talk to his alibi witnesses, correct?
Never would.
Never actually got a chance to go speak to his alibi witnesses?
The ones that he provided at that time, no.
Right. And the DNA wasn't submitted until after his deposition after your deposition, I'm sorry, in 2016, correct?
That's correct.
And as far as the cell phone information goes, nobody ever went and talked to his brother and obtained the phone number from his brother. All you had was the prefix, right?
Actually, we didn't have to.
You didn't have to what?
We didn't have to go talk to his brother at that point.
To get the phone number?
Correct.
Why was that?
During the deposition, when you asked me, obviously it was several years later, and job tasks were spread out throughout the investigators. It turns out that 5 court orders were done in this case to include Paramore's girlfriend, who at the time he said was using her phone as well. We were able to manipulate and look at the phone numbers and the 386 prefixes, who is common with Griffin. We were able to do court orders on them as well.
Did you guys ever go verify with Paramore's brother that that was the particular 386 number he was using at the time?
No, sir.
Okay. I know it's not your job, but were you ever aware of what Haywood Griffin, who was supposed to have committed the offense with Mr. Paramore, according to Mr. Paramore, what his phone records showed?
No, sir.
Okay. No further questions for the witnesses at this time.
Step down.
Okay.
Further testimony.
Call John Sawicki, Your Honor.
Face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Sawicki, can you please state and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
John Sawicki, John Sawicki.
And in the case of reviewing information for this case, did you have an opportunity to review call data records for phone number 850-241-3381?
I did.
And who is the subscriber associated with that record?
Haywood Griffin.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
For purposes of this hearing. Is that a true and accurate copy of the records that you reviewed relative to Mr. Griffin's call data and tower data for the period around the murder in this case?
This appears to be consistent with what I reviewed.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity specifically to analyze the data related to the towers and sectors with which his handset was communicating during the night of the murder?
I did.
And what did that information reveal?
The handset was connected predominantly to 2 towers, and if I could refer to the records for just a moment.
Yes, sir.
beginning at approximately 6:23 in the evening and continuing through
6:23 p.m.
6:23 p.m., Your Honor. Continuing on through the most of the rest of the evening and actually into the next morning, 11:19 the next morning. The handset's connecting to two towers. Sector 2 on Tower 232 and Sector 1 on Tower 157.
And what towers and sectors, where are those towers and sectors relative to the victim Peter's home?
I've actually got maps plotted that would show them. That would probably a little easier than describing it, but they're both located a mile to a mile and a half away from the crime scene.
Okay. And the individual sectors, are they those sectors with which the handset was communicating facing directionally the victim's home?
That's correct.
Okay. And was his handset within range, had his handset been at the victim's house, would his handset have been within range of each of those towers throughout the night?
I haven't seen anything that would indicate it was out of range. They're approximately a mile and a half away. These towers would more than likely be able to communicate with a handset located at that house.
So is the, if the handset were at the victim's house, are the cell phone's records consistent with that location?
Yes, they are.
Okay, no further questions.
Cross.
What cell phone company does he have?
Sprint.
Okay. As it relates to Mr. Griffin, you aware where Mr. Griffin lives?
I actually am not.
You're not aware of Mr. Griffin. If I were to tell you that he lives right in the middle of that area and not very far from the victim, you didn't do any comparisons to determine that he was actually at home during that time period, did you?
I don't know that we could do a comparison at this point to show that he was actually at a home.
You don't know that the cell phone tower information that you've got, if that was his home, was in that Sector 1 or something like that, that it would show that he was around his home?
You could show that he was in the general area, yes, but it couldn't show that he was at home.
Okay. The cell phone data that you have there, the events that are occurring that you're talking about that are throughout the evening into the early morning hours, they are both active and passive, are they not?
That's correct.
So he's actually utilizing the phone.
Yes, sir.
So essentially, in order to commit this homicide, he would have to be texting, calling, or whatever it is while he's beating down Brandy Peters, correct?
I don't know that that is correct.
Okay, no further.
Redirect.
Why do you say that you don't know that that's correct?
Because, and I'll have to refer to the records again here for just a moment, but I don't believe that there is constant phone activity throughout the entire evening. And what I mean by that is there certainly could be blocks of time in there where the phone's not actually being used, that someone could certainly be doing something other than utilizing the phone.
Same as with the records for Mr. Segura that you reviewed. There are periods of inactivity.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, if I have to recall for the state's purposes, that's fine. Do you have those maps you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And the 157 and the 232 are the two towers that we're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to move these into evidence for the purposes here.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
How many sheets are there?
There are 3 sheets, Your Honor, we can mark them 1A, B, and C.
1A, B, and C for purposes. I'm afraid we'll get it mixed up because of evidence. You keep it separate? Okay. Be for purposes of this hearing.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You want to do anything with the map, Mr.
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down. Who would be your next one?
No further witnesses at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. So does the state have testimony?
Your Honor, I wasn't aware Mr. Sawicki was going to be testifying about any kind of cell phone records. Mr. Corbett is not still in the courthouse. He is at the Tallahassee Police Department. I would ask to give a break. Mr. Corbett can testify the fact that Mr. Griffin's home is within that tower information, that tower location.
just stipulate to that fact, I know it is.
Right. We'll accept that. You have further, Mr. Fuchs, you wish to present?
No, nothing further than that.
Okay. All right, you can be heard, Mr. Prince.
It's essentially the same argument as with respect to Santos. There is evidence which is corroborative of the statement in the form of the cell phone data. The expert testified that the records are consistent with the phone being in the area in the directional sector of the victim's house, combined with a confession that was repeated once on wire and once not on wire. I would suggest again that the credibility of that confession is something that is proper for the jury, not the court, to consider in determining what to do with it.
Tell me the theory you think it fits because I think we need to be clear here on the record what legal theory we're proposing. We have the due process, the admission against interest, or I guess those are the two in play here.
Yes, sir. I'm suggesting that it's admissible regardless of hearsay pursuant to the Sixth Amendment and due process 14th Amendment.
Okay, under the Chambers case?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I don't think there's that much more that I need to say about that.
Okay.
The court's read my case law and understands my position.
Mr. Fuchs?
Your Honor, go to Chambers. Confession or statement was made spontaneously or close to an acquaintance shortly after the crime occurred. We don't have that in this situation. I don't think it actually is in evidence, but I'll tell Your Honor that it was around March of 2011, so we're talking about 5-6 months after the event that Mr. Washington came to law enforcement in order to do this call that we're talking about. So element number one has not been met. Number two has certainly not been met. There is no confession or there's no corroboration by other evidence in the case. Mr. Prince is arguing that because the cell phone records for Mr. Griffin was being utilized during that time period, that is a corroboration. Your Honor, that's where Mr. Griffin lives. He's at his house. If that's the case, you're talking about all the neighbors that would be there if they made some sort of statement are potential suspects. Being in your own home is one of the biggest protections, and safe in your own home is one of the biggest protections the Constitution of the United States allows for. That goes to the Fourth Amendment. Simply the fact that Mr. Griffin is at home utilizing his phone, and then somebody else says that he was involved in the killing does not implicate Mr. Griffin. Mr. Griffin never made this statement. This was made by Mr. Paramore to Gregory Washington, and let's make that clear. Mr. Griffin has never made a statement regarding this. Then to try and bootstrap it in because he's at his home utilizing his phone, and I believe the testimony of Investigator Corbett would be that everything's consistent with being at his home. So that it doesn't meet the first or the second element of the Chamber's analysis as it relates to that. Furthermore, there's always the evaluation of prejudice versus probative. Gregory Washington is such a, and I know the court can't make a determination as it relates to the credibility of a particular witness, but Gregory Washington had done this so often, he was actually banned from calling the state attorney's office. That was actually here and put forth in the court, and that he is the only person this statement was in fact made to. Even Mr. Washington said, Mr. Paramore never said on that wiretap that he had killed somebody. He just said that the reason the kids probably had to die was because of witnesses. I think we all know that's the reason why the kids had to die, is to make sure that there is no witnesses as to actually killed them. That is not a corroboration or a situation in which we can then bootstrap it further. That